Hello guys and welcome back. It is time to finish the M4 Sherman, for which we painted the commander in the last episode. In this episode we will do all the painting and weathering and finish the kit. Let's not waste any time and get started right away. First we need to break the model down into smaller sub-assemblies. And then everything goes straight into the spray booth. As usual for my tank models, I prime everything with Vallejo's Makeup Primer Black. Not only is this primer extremely reliable and scratch resistant, but it is also very easy to spray. I thin all my Vallejo paints with the appropriate flow improver. If possible, I let the primer dry completely for at least 12 hours. We stay in the spray booth. Next, it's the base color. Almost all American ground vehicles are painted in olive drab. Olive drab has a relatively broad color spectrum and there is no single true color. Some shades are darker, others greener, and still others lean towards yellow-green. I chose the modulation set from AK Interactive. The base in this case is olive drab base. Since the Sherman's camouflage is only one color, I will be using color modulation to make it look a bit more interesting. After the base color, I will use a slightly lighter shade of green from the set to brighten the edges and horizontal surfaces. I will use a piece of paper as a stencil to spray straight edges and reduce overspray. Currently the difference looks quite strong, but it will weaken further. I will use this effect especially on the roof of the turret, as this is the highest point of the tank. Here I pay attention to a soft transition from light to dark and avoid any hard edges. Then I spray everything again with a very thin layer of the base color to bring everything together again. Here we have the model after the modulation is complete. Considering I don't use this technique often, the effect is still quite nice. Next come more highlights, but this time more precisely and controlled with a brush. I take the lightest color from the modulation set and use it to emphasize all the details and edges around the armor. I control the intensity by thinning or applying multiple layers. This step might be a bit too contrasty for some, but I really like it for bringing out all the details better. Of course, the contrast is toned down in later steps again. I am also going to apply the required decals now, as I want them to be underneath the chipping. Normally I would spray the surface with clear varnish first, but since the surface beneath of the decals is smooth, I'm skipping that step here. The decals will be molded to the surface using softener and gentle pressure. Now we can start the chipping. First, I mix a slightly lighter shade based on my base color. I dab a small piece of sponge over the edges and surfaces to create small random chips. The control with the sponge is little less, but significantly faster than if I were to apply each individual chip with a brush. I distribute the chipping over the entire tank, but increase the intensity in areas where wear or damage would be significantly higher. These include edges, the mud flaps, the areas where the crew moves and the tools are stored. But now I do need the brush. I'm joining some of the smaller chips into larger ones. Also for the edges, it is a lot more precise to use a brush. And this is what Sherman looks like after the first chipping step. The surface already looks considerably more interesting, I think. To simulate the deeper chips, I am using dark rust from Vallejo. Here the paint has chipped away completely and exposed the bare metal, which has rusted due to it being exposed. I paint these chips inside the previous lighter chips, while making sure to keep a faint outline of the lighter shade visible. With this two-color chipping, you can create a lot more depth, and it helps to literally highlight the usually darker chips. This method of chipping is of course very time-consuming, depending on how detailed you want to get. But in my opinion, you can definitely invest this time to make your model pop even more. The fine and smallest chips are applied with a sponge again. Less control, but faster and finer. Next in line are the tools stored all over the Sherman. When it comes to tools mounted directly on the vehicle, there's often a debate about whether they were painted in camouflage or left unpainted. In the case of the Sherman, both options are likely correct. I like to leave the tools in their normal state to increase the contrast with the rest of the vehicle and make them stand out more. Although you can also achieve a very nice effect with chipped tools, maybe I do that next time. And now let's take a look at the hedgerow cutter. I decided to use the olive drab as a base tone here instead of making it bare metal. Since this piece of equipment would have lots of contact with other things, it would be quite worn down. To simulate this, I'm using the same chipping color as for the tank itself, but a lot more intense. To make the metal on the tools look more like actual metal, I'm applying a very thin light grey wash over these parts. Once the wash has dried, it will leave a faint and random color variation that should look more like distressed metal. The kit does not include any clear parts for the headlights, so we have to work with what we have. I usually paint the headlight like this either in white or silver, as I'm doing here. The periscope inside the commander's hatch is painted white, and the pad on the other side in leather. Now we will do some sponge chipping for bare metal. Worn down parts that are in constant contact with others will be chipped, but stay shiny and not letting any rust appear. The common place for these are the teeth on the drive sprocket. The same goes for the track skid and track support roller on the boobies. And don't forget the edges of our hedgerow cutter. According to one of my weathering books, the outer edge of the road wheels could be in bare metal as well. I did try this effect here by applying some graphite on them, but I don't think any of that was visible in the very end. Let's take a quick break from the tank and work on the storage items. I begin by applying a base coat over all items. For the wooden crates, I used old wood, and for all the soft items I used different shades of green, khaki and brown. You can even mix them with each other to create even more variation. You may need a few layers to get an even base coat before you can continue. On the jerrycans I do some chipping with aluminium to show a bit of damage. After all pieces have been base coated, I'm adding some faint highlights to make it look a bit more three-dimensional. I paint the topmost part and edges of all individual items in a lighter shade and blend it downwards. It is basically the same method I did on my figure painting tutorial last episode. Painting storage items like this is like a small model itself, and you could probably spend a few hours on a small piece like this. A nice detail for the wooden crates is highlighting each plank with a little bit of buff at the edge. And for the shadows, I simply apply a dark wash over everything after I have coated the items with a clear varnish. The wash will flow into all the recesses and folds and create some nice shadows. This is our current progress. The acrylic paints are now complete, and next up are enamel paints. Therefore, I'm going to spray the entire model with a protective layer of clear varnish. I'm mixing gloss and matte clear varnish to achieve a semi-gloss finish. A semi-gloss finish is still good for pin washes and is easier to make matte again than a glossy layer. Instead of a premixed wash, I'm using my oil colors again, since their pigments have much better quality. I will use the oil paint for my pin wash. A pin wash is one of the fundamental weathering techniques, so you probably already know how to apply one. To make it quick, the wash is applied around all details, raised areas, corners and places that have a lot of texture. Due to capillary action, the paint almost flows itself into the right place. And don't worry, any mistakes can later be fixed and cleaned without a hurry using white spirit. Next are the matte effects on the lower hull. The first layer is a ready-made acrylic matte from Vallejo. This one includes some grass fibers for even more texture. This layer is supposed to give a lot of volume and represent dirt that built up and accumulated over a longer period of time. I blend the edges with tap water to create a softer transition. I'm doing these steps now before I attach the boogies, as they would be in the way most of the time. Only thing I have to look out for is to keep the area where they are attached clean as possible. Now I'm doing some dirt streaking effects. I'm applying a thin line of enamel matte at the top here. Then I give the matte a few minutes to start drying. With a jagged brush dipped in a little bit of white spirit, I can now drag the matte down. This creates the effect of rundown mud and dust that would have accumulated at the top and then started to drip down once it gets wet. I use the same mud as a sort of wash over the acrylic mud, to give both of them a similar color. Matching the colors of different products you use is quite important, as too many different colors with hard edges may look unrealistic. Once the previous streaking effects have dried, you can add other layers on top if you want to intensify the effect. Then I'm doing the same steps but with another lighter matte color, to create some color variation. Since the previous layer is still a bit wet, it creates a soft transition. Then I'm applying the same lighter matte on the lowest part of the hull as well. But instead of creating streaks, I am creating some soft edges with white spirit. I'm letting all of these effects dry now until I continue. The final steps for the lower hull are some splashes using the previous two matte colors. Both times I load some mud on a brush and then use the airflow on my airbrush to apply small splashes. If some of them are too big, I can simply blend them with white spirit to remove them. And this is how the lower hull looks once everything had time to dry. Now I can attach the boogies with superglue. Of course, I can't leave them clean just like that, so I'm adding the mud effects as a wash on here as well. When the mud is diluted like that, it creates a really nice looking dust effect once it has dried. And then just a few mud splashes on the boogies as well. Okay, let's put the model aside and have a quick rundown of how I made the tracks. After priming them in German grey, I apply a dry brush using a lighter shade of grey. These types of tracks had full rubber pads, so I am using the lighter grey to show some wear and also highlight the edges. The other connectors would be made of metal. The dark grey acts as a base coat for the metal parts as well. With the sponge I can create some rust chipping to differentiate them from the rest of the tracks. While the difference is not that easy to see on camera, compared to before it looks a lot better. Once the acrylics have dried, I take out the two mud effects again and apply them as a wash in an uneven pattern. For the finer texture, I am adding just a few splashes like I did previously. I am trying to keep the raised parts of the track pads clean, as those would rub off on the roads and not accumulate as much dirt. And finally, I glue the tracks together with super glue and attach them to the tank. Alright, with the tracks in place, we can get back to the tank. Time for the sides of the upper hull. I begin with streaking grime. This is basically applied in the same way I did the previous streaks. Add thin vertical lines with a brush and then drag them down to blend them. Repeat this step until you are satisfied with the result. For the dirt and dust, I am adding a thin line of light mud right in the edge here. It is then blended upwards. That way I also create some streaks that are a nice contrast to the darker ones I did before. On top of that, I add another layer of mud. But this time I'm blending it with a dry brush to create a soft transition. If you are doing this, I recommend an old brush, since dry blending usually destroys the tip of any brush. Back here, the tracks will stir up a lot of dirt and dust, so the deposits can therefore be quite heavy and cover the entire area. Same goes for the front and back above the tracks. Also, if you have any storage on your tank, don't forget to weather it as well as needed. To tie down my storage items, I used a piece of twine. How about some slight rust effects on the tools? While they wouldn't be completely covered in rust, a few small spots and sort of like a thin wash would enhance them greatly. I'm using these weathering pencils from AK. They are basically just watercolor pencils, but in colors and shades that are more suitable for scale modeling. Okay, one last time I'm taking out the bottle of mud effects, I promise. The tank is still missing some fine textures, so I'm adding more mud splashes over the sides. And covering the tracks with a piece of paper as to not overdo them, because we did them previously. While all vertical surfaces look weathered now, the horizontal ones are still clean. This would look unrealistic, so we need to add just a tiny amount of dust in these places. To create these effects, I'm using an oil brusher. That's basically just oil color in a little tube with a brush applicator for easier use. I apply it around a few raised parts and the areas where crew would move around. Then I just do some dry blending again to create soft edges. Just don't overdo it, because you would cover all the pin washes from earlier. You can use a graphite pencil to enhance some of the metal parts like machine guns and towing cables. This step is best done after covering everything with a matte clear varnish, so it's shining in contrast. For the final touches, I'm adding a few splashes of engine oil onto the rear deck and around the fuel caps to give it some contrast. And with that, it looks like we are finished here. Let's take a look at our final result. For this kit being the old basic Tamiya one, I had a surprising amount of fun with it, and I think it turned out really well. But what do you think? I have some interesting things planned for my future projects, but I don't want to spoil anything yet. Also, my King Tiger diorama I promised like over half a year ago is still in progress, it just needs some time. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe to never miss any future uploads. Thank you all for watching and see you next time.